everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Chop, chop, read this now, N-O-W, right now.
Right this second. Well, because there's such a sense of urgency around this, let's go ahead and dive in. What have you been reading this week, my friend?
All right, usually my level of excitement is like right here or right here, and now somehow it's like right way up there this week, Jen. I'm so excited. I hope I can do this justice. I would go so far as to say what I'm about to share would be called in other circles like the most highly anticipated, not book now because it's out, but like series. I think this book is going to be a series, so I'm going to call it, for me personally, now the most highly anticipated future series ever. So excited. So I want to why am I so excited? The main character of this story, this book, probably written for I would say third, fourth, fifth grade, somewhere in there. His name is Eddie Holloway, and his voice, his passion, his confidence, the author, and just through dialogue, actually just through Eddie's direct sharing as he's talking to us as readers, it's really unique and engaging and magnetic. Like Eddie, this kid has an orbit that, I could picture if I was his teacher or his friend, it'd be fun. There'd be lots of laughs and maybe eye rolls and high fives and all the things. But here, so this is what hooked me. Lots of things hooked me. And I'm going to show you the cover just because it's so beautiful and curious too, but then I got to read to you the first page of this book because it really hooked me off the start. So it's from the book, drum roll please.
Can't wait.
It's the end of the world, and I'm in my bathing suit. Okay, This is true. Eddie is in his bathing suit, so it's a true title by Justin A. Reynolds. And here's how this book starts. That I'll just read it. And you always do such a nice job reading, so I hope I don't embarrass myself here too much.
It'll be perfect. I can't wait. It's story time.
Yeah. This is from Eddie to us, I guess. An extremely brief note from our storytelling master, Eddie Gordon Holloway, who is about to hook you up. Yo, what up? Before we jump into the story, first I'm going to hook you up. I know. You can hardly believe it, right? I mean, how many books have you read that took care of you? RIP. Like, I don't know what RIP means, but I get it, okay? I'm not cool enough to know that. Anyway, but listen, have you heard the term RIP before?
No, but I'm in love with this. I'm in love with every single aspect of it. Go ahead.
Okay. But listen, don't even worry about it. Consider this a little something to let you know I've got your back. You can thank me later. Okay, so look, when someone sees me reading, I already know what's coming. It's always the same two questions. Question number one, you could probably guess. Hey, Eddie, what book are you reading? Well, this one's an easy to answer. Although, honestly, it would be kind of weird to admit I'm actually reading my own book. Anyway, question number two is where they try to get you. Smiling at you, they're all like, hey, Eddie, what chapter are you on? Now, listen, I have zero problem saying, oh, hey, I'm on chapter 1. I mean, if I'm actually on chapter 1. If I'm on chapter 57, obviously I say 57. But let's be real. Whoever is asking you what chapter you're on is probably checking up on you, which you got to admit is a pretty solid teacher, librarian, parent, or babysitter move. Are you really doing your work? Question. And if you're only on chapter 1, chances are you're probably not really doing your work. Anyway, he goes on to share a teeny bit more. He does hook us up. He starts on chapter 100 instead of 1, right? And then chapter 2 is 200. So I just loved, as I was sharing, doing teeny little book talks or sharing what I was reading on Twitter, I said, just started this book and I'm already on chapter 100. If you know, you know. I just get a kick out of that. And the other thing I'll say, admittedly, I'm sometimes a little skeptical. I kind of, as I read that, I thought it was cool and different, but then I was wondering, like, is this book going to be gimmicky? If that makes any sense? Not at all. Eddie is so authentic throughout. And like I said, he obviously left an impression on me. What's the book about? In a nutshell, one of the reasons I related to this a teeny tiny bit is my parents were divorced when I was in, I think, 3rd grade. I ended up doing my laundry all through growing up, just because that was one of the things that I did. And I did not enjoy doing the laundry, although I don't know if anyone does. And I wasn't very good at it because like a lot of my t-shirts I would wear were pink. And if you do laundry, you know what issue
Yeah.
I had, right?
Yeah.
Or they were kind of washed out gray. I'd have white
Yeah.
t-shirts that weren't white. And so Eddie despises doing laundry, and he hatches this master plan. And this is all right in the beginning of the book, so I'm not giving anything away. It's like, how can he avoid doing the laundry, even though he needs to do the laundry? So he wears every article of clothing that he has, like sweaters that he wouldn't be caught dead in, shorts that are too big, things that are too tight, socks, just things out of fashion. And his plan is not to do laundry for half the summer. And he calculates this all out to get him up to this big celebration day, beach day in the town. And he makes it. He makes it to beach day. And he's literally on his last article of clothing, which, as you can guess, it's his swimsuit. And it's not like a super stylish swimsuit. He said it's too small. Like, anyway, he's in the swimsuit.
Lots of issues. But
the plan does not work because his mom stumbles upon it on that last day. Everything backfires. He's prohibited from going to the beach day, which it's like the biggest thing ever in his town. And this whole weird series of events and adventure happens. And I think I'll leave it right there. Highly recommend it. I can tell it's going to be a series. The author, I think, was pretty transparent about that. And this book should be a series. It's not one of those things where you're like, oh, here they go. It's like, I want every one of these books, and I actually hope it's like 10 or 20 books because I could follow this character all day long. And that's why I'm telling you right now, read this now, people.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love it. Now I have a copy of that book, but I have not read it yet. But your book talk just makes me want to bump it right up to the top of the pile. Also, I just would be mad at myself if I didn't say that one of the things I just loved about your book talk is it perfectly illustrates the power of read alouds, because not only does it give you the opportunity to share, a snippet into the book, but it also gives you the opportunity to really authentically share your passion for the book, because you can hear your excitement as you're reading it. But also you can say things like, I'm not cool enough to know what that word means. Do you know? And like, have your kids. Like, I just think it's such an insight, not only to the book, but also into the reading life, which I find to be so incredibly important. And I just love that. So thank you for doing that for us. And that book looks crazy. I think Justin Reynolds is amazing. And, I would read anything he published. So I'm excited to get that one at the top of my list now. So awesome.
Yeah, it's so fun. So fun.
What grade levels would you say? Or is it?
Yeah, I think sometimes I go online just to see what other people are recommending or saying. And you know me, I don't always go as low as they say. Online, I saw like 8-year-olds and up. And 8-year-olds, I was a second grade teacher, so I just know right off the bat that that's kind of the older second graders are typically 8 years old. I might say third or fourth grade. And this is where you're going to think I'm just a fuddy-duddy, I think the term is. Part of
I'm too cool to know that term. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Eddie has a term for his stepdad, and it's some, God, what is it? It's an abbreviation, like not my real dad, or it's pretend dad, or it's kind of, and you can picture it be a thing a kid might think. But just knowing how hurtful that could be to a step parent who's just loving and trying to be part of the family, I just was a little bit hesitant. But I guess in my perfect mind, I think to myself, oh, second graders and third graders never have funny terms or names for people, right? The reality is I could see why easily second graders could read it, especially for read aloud, because it'd be a good conversation that a teacher or librarian or principal could have with kids about slang or the names or the words they're using for their family members, and maybe the gravity that those sometimes carry. So personally, I'd say third or fourth grade, but I could see a great class conversation in second grade.
And Eddie is in the third grade, right? Is that what you said? Or
fourth? Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't remember.
I love that. I think sometimes I think about books as being right for ages with support and then right for other ages without support. So, like some books are excellent for a read aloud or to do as a book club book with. a certain grade because you know that it's going to be read with an adult who can support the conversations and stuff. Whereas other kids just a year or two older might be just fine in handling those books without that support, you know?
Yeah, and there was one other aspect. I should mention this one. These were the two things that I can remember at least where I thought, I don't think I'd do a second grader. Eddie has a crush on a young woman or a girl in his neighborhood, and he kind of in Eddie fashion goes on and on about just how amazing she is, and her eyes sparkle, and he refers to her as hot. And I just have issues with objectifying women and girls.
Yes.
So again, that's why I'm like, maybe we should save this one for 10th, 11th, 12th, maybe college. No.
I knew that's where that was going. I knew it was. The minute I heard the word hot, I knew you were like, this is firmly a young adult title. Like, I knew that was it. I agree with you. I think that there's, in the sense that I think kids as young as second grade parrot those words a lot of times. You know, they might feel like it would be cool to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or some kind of, you know, partner, and they parrot the terminology that they hear on TV or their older siblings or parents using, not really knowing what that means or even necessarily associating it with like attraction or any of those things, like associate with their own real emotions or responses. It's just parroting. So books like that, whether you're talking about a name that you might make up for your step parent or calling the girl that you have a crush on hot or whatever, you're exactly right. They just open up an opportunity for conversation about language and how your intention may not always match your outcome. Like, you may not intend anything bad by calling your stepdad the fake parent or whatever it is. Like, you might see that as a loving sort of ribbing kind of thing. But if the outcome is that it makes your step parent feel othered or makes them feel bad or like less of your dad, then that's more important than your intention. Your intention matters, but the outcome is more important. The same thing is true when you call someone hot or you objectify them or you talk about them only in terms of their physical appearance. While you might see that as a compliment, if it makes that person feel so uncomfortable, that matters more than what your intention is. So
right, yeah. And I think just to make sure, kind of the overall takeaway that I'll double down on is just how ridiculously fun and the amount of personality that Justin A. Reynolds packed into the book. It's really fascinating. The thing I was most impressed with, Jen, is how natural Justin made the dialogue or Eddie's talking to me feel. Like, there's maybe only once or twice I was tripped up and had to reread for flow. It was masterfully, like, for when you have such personality and a character saying such zany, off the wall, even sarcastic every once in a while stuff. Usually sometimes it might be harder to read, but man, it was just natural and it was really, really cool.
Well, I'll say one last thing is that I don't know who the illustrator is of the cover for that book, and I certainly don't expect you to know. I mean, those people are, when you do the illustrations for covers of middle grades or high school books, oftentimes that's left off. But whoever that person was, they really did a good job of capturing what sounds like to be just a book that is full of fun. Like, there's just fun on every page. And the cover really conveys that message to me.
It sure does. Another last thing, I promise. There's just so much about this, but I didn't notice. I love the cover art now that you mentioned it, but I didn't notice this right away until I read the story. One of Eddie's best friends comes over with half a haircut, like their afro is half in.
It's been cut off.
The power, and again, this is in the beginning, so I'm not giving anything away, but the power went out, so the razor, couldn't finish the job. And I didn't, so I went back to look at the characters. I'm like, I don't see that. And then I looked closer. I'm like, oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm not very good at pointing. There it is. There's the razor, and there is the kiddo with half the haircut.
I love it.
And I love how natural or subtly, I'm sure it was intentional. It's there, but yet it's subtle. I'm like, that is cool. That is cool.
I swear to you that I didn't bring this up as a way to set me up for my book talk, but I am going to talk about the cover of my book too. There's like a the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, is so ridiculous because we all judge books by their cover, and a cover can like make or break. When you're just looking for a book and you stumble across one that looks interesting, but the cover just doesn't appeal to you, you might put that back. Versus the other way, you might not even care what that book's about. The cover's so awesome, you have to check it out. Like that's just the way it is. And so that really does lead me into the book that I'm going to book talk this week, which, Brad, I swear I say this every single week, and I know you're going to stop believing me, but this was yet another book I read this year that I felt like was tailor-made for Brad Gustafson. Like every time I've read this book and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Brad would love this book. So you have to add this to your list, my friend, your growing list. But I picked it up. I heard a bunch of people recommending it, but then when I saw the cover, I knew I absolutely had to read it. And I don't know if you have seen this cover, but the title of the book is Worser. It's by Jennifer Ziegler. And can you see how the title Worser is just like covered in words, filled with words in there? Yep. And then you can see those words sort of in the background as well. And we see our main character on the cover, and then we see some of the other characters on the back. Of course, you wouldn't know who those were until after you've read the book. But this idea of this, all I knew from the cover was that, and I don't know if you can see in the backpack, he's carrying something that's called masterwork. And there's just all these words everywhere. And, as somebody who's a word nerd herself, I was just drawn to this. I'm thinking, I want to know, this book is really cool and I want to know what it's about. And it's about this kid whose name is William Orser, Orser. But of course, first initial, last name, Worser, he becomes nicknamed, again, maybe lovingly, maybe not, by his classmates. He doesn't feel like it's a loving nickname at all, Worser. And that name is super ironic because, of course, Worser is not a correct grammatical form of the word worse. When we say something is like even more worse, we don't call it worser. Like that's just not that's not a correct use of the word. And that is very ironic because Worser himself, William Worser, is a complete word fanatic. He lives with his mom, who is a college professor. Together they do things like the New York Times crossword puzzle, and they make jokes about how the people who create the crossword puzzle don't really understand the words. They are word aficionados. They play Scrabble like at the highest level. They are just word people, right? So the idea that his nickname would also be an incorrect word is just it's like it's insult added to injury. You know what I mean? Like it is just the icing on the cake. But Worser, who sort of lives this very sheltered life with his mom, who doesn't require or need any friends beyond her, who is perfectly satisfied with just spending his life feeling superior to everyone else, has his world really turned upside down when his mother has a terrible stroke. And that stroke causes her to not be able to communicate anymore. And not simply because she's lost speech, but because in the aftermath of the stroke, she's unable to even understand language, really. She's lost all of her ability to communicate. And when you consider how their life was really built on communication, it feels like almost double the impact that it might have on a family whose life isn't built around that, right? So suddenly Worser is put in this predicament where he has to live with his aunt who has moved in to try to take care of her sister and Worser, and his aunt is the exact opposite of his mom. Like she believes in feelings and paintings and emotions and like how things can't always be expressed in words, and for Worser that like flies in the face of everything he's ever been taught. So he feels really uncomfortable at home, and that discomfort and his pain starts to show up at school. where he finds himself in the position of meeting people for the very first time, of needing friends, of needing a community that he's never needed before, because it was always just him and his mom against the world, you know? And because Worcester doesn't have any practice at that, because he spent his whole life feeling like he was better and smarter than everyone else, you can imagine the sort of mishaps and shenanigans that include, that result in him trying to fumble along and develop some friendships. Some of those mishaps are funny, and we get sort of a kick out of seeing him stumble along because his stumbles are very relatable. And some of them are are a little darker and harder to deal with. But all the way along, I found myself just rooting for this kid who seems so completely out of place and who's struggling to find his place, which I think is a universal struggle, right? Even though Worcester's situation is kind of unique, we all know what it's like to try to figure out how we fit in. And so I loved it. I thought it was so well done. And I feel like it's the kind of book that I could see being made into a TV show, like
Cool.
the dialogue and the exposition. And also, I have to say, all of the side characters, I love the side characters in this book so much. For example, there's a bookstore owner who becomes incredibly important in the book. And even though he's super important, I can't remember his name right now, but he is the grumpiest, most curmudgeonly, gruff bookstore owner with sort of this kernel of a heart of gold deep down in there, that somehow Worcester is able to get out of him. I love all of those people so much. And it felt like the kind of book I would love to see made into a movie, because I think it would lend itself to that. But either way, the whole time I just kept thinking Brad would love this book. This is a book for Brad Gustafson. So I'm giving it the Book for Brad award today. Like I feel like it deserves that, but I also just think it deserves a place on our shelves and in our hearts, and you should read it right now. It's called Worcester by Jennifer Ziegler.
How amazing. I wouldn't have guessed the last name thing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I play Wordle on a word game with my son on a regular basis. So as you were talking about the stroke and like that away, as devastating and hard and challenging as that would be, like part of me, I think also would mourn the loss of that ability to connect in that way with my son.
Yes. And imagine if that was really kind of the only way you connected with him. Like you and your son, I know you connect in lots of ways, but and that's not diminishing the way that you just mentioned, but it seemed like for Worcester and his mom, that was like kind of the old, like it was the foundation. It really was the thread that ran through everything that they did together, was this like love of words and communicating and feeling superior to other people who didn't have their vocabulary and their intellect. Like that was kind of it. And that makes Worcester hard to love in some ways, because he is very much like, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. He's snooty, he's snooty. He's
a little pompous.
Yes, he comes off as that. But as the book progresses and you sort of peel back those layers and understand why those layers have been built up, it's hard not to love him then. You start off, he's hard to love, but by the end, he's hard not to love. So
in your own best professional judgment, can you tell us what the master work was on his backpack, or does that
I definitely can't tell you. It's incredibly important to the book, so I cannot. But I'm going to tell you what, you would love it. So you have got to. If I don't know how else to convey that this book is what you need to read, Brad. That's it. There's so many moments in there. I thought, oh, Brad would love this. So
Jenn, my life since meeting you and collaborating with you is infinitely better, but my pocketbook is infinitely less with all the books I bought.
Hey, listen, you know what? I don't feel bad at all, because I know all of that Captain America themed recreational gear costs a lot more than the books I've recommended. So it's just a matter of priorities, my friend. Priorities.
All right. If you'd like to see all the books Jenn has talked me into buying and reading over the years, we have a spreadsheet that's really incredible. It's at bit.ly/read_this_now. And I actually visit that time and time again, Jenn, just to go back. And honestly, I'll remember this and I'll go back and I'll be like, what book did Jenn tell me to buy? And that's one way I buy my book.
I do the exact same thing. And I know other people do. It's a joy to keep it. So thank you to everybody who's watching today. And we'll see you next week. Happy reading, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.